for a purpose, and the purpose was so that we could record this presentation for people who can't make it. So this way your dad can see it, and Dan and Wilma and a couple other people from both congregations, so that they can see about my trip to Israel. And so the trip that I took to Israel was a pilgrimage that was put together by the Knights Templar. Basically what it is they sponsor clergy from across the United States to go and actually walk in the footsteps of the people of the Bible. I thought it was just Jesus's footsteps, but we'll get there. So we got to go to much more than that, but the Knights Templar sponsor us to go. This gentleman who put it together has been doing it since 1987. He does 3 pilgrimages a year. And so he knows the people, he knows the places, he has connections not only with the tour group but just the people who are there. And so he spends a lot of time in Israel, and that'll be part of my story as we move forward. So on the days leading up to leaving for Israel, most of you know we had a really wonderful snowstorm on the eastern seaboard. Poor Liz got stuck back on the East Coast, and I couldn't get there. We were supposed to leave on a Monday, and because of all of that, it took us till Wednesday to get there. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the timeline. I left Wednesday morning at 3 o'clock from Madison. I got to sleep in my bed for 2 days, while these guys got to sit in the airport for 2 days. These are 4 of the gentlemen that I went to Israel with. They were clergy from all across, like I said, America, but they also were all denominations. So we had Lutherans and we had Baptists, and we had agnostics. We had all kinds of people. Some of them were even recovering Catholics. So we were all part. There were 25 of us that were supposed to go. 23 of us made it. 2 of us didn't get there, could not get to Newark to leave. So left at 3 o'clock Monday morning. We left Newark, New Jersey at 3:30 Wednesday afternoon. And we were in Israel at 8:30 Thursday morning. And you got to put the time change in there. So we were already up over 24 hours when we got to Israel. Like I said, we were there to see the biblical sites, but also to learn about Israel today and yesterday. There are so many questions even before all of the bombs and everything that was going on. There are so many questions about Israel that I had and many people have. And so one of the things that we were charged with was to take back the stories that we heard, to take back the information that we learned. So you have a piece of paper. This actually came out in the Knights Templar magazine. This has the same map that is up on the screen right here. So you can kind of follow along a little bit. It's still small. In the middle of the Mediterranean Sea between Gaza and Lebanon, you will see Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is where we flew into. Tel Aviv is the largest city in Israel. This is their hub. This is, very metropolitan. This is their New York. This is where their financial center is. This is where a lot of their research and everything is. So this is their largest city. So we flew into Tel Aviv, and immediately after getting through customs, we got on a bus. And when we got on that bus, our wonderful guide, his name is Marty. Marty is Reserve IDF, which stands for Israeli Defense Force. So he was in the reserves, and that's going to also be important here in the future. But Marty is a Zionist from Argentina. Now, a lot of us hear the word Zionist, and it's got a negative connotation. All it means is that they want to get back to their homeland. His family immigrated to Argentina 3 generations ago. They remained Jews, and when he was 5 or 6, they moved back to Israel. That's what makes them a Zionist. They wanted to get back to Israel. Okay? So he has lived in Israel the majority of his life, is of the Jewish faith. He is an American Jew, and that'll make sense here in a little bit. So he was in charge of telling us all these stories, and the first thing that he told us was, you missed the first 2 days of your tour. We're going to cram the first 2 days into these 2 days along with these 2 days, which meant we were getting 4 days of tours in 2 days. Again, we haven't slept yet, unless we could sleep on a plane, and I cannot sleep on a plane. So we started and went straight to Caesarea. On our way to Caesarea, he gave us a history lesson and who lives in Israel. So the history, 2000 BC, we know the Canaanites lived in Israel. That was the time of Abraham. In 1000 BC, Israelites lived in Israel, and that was the time of David. 1 BC is known as the Byzantine era. This is when the Romans were in charge of the Israeli land. This is the time of Herod. This is the time of Jesus. And this is where Constantine's mom, St. Helena, is very important. When Constantine became a Christian, his mom, St. Helena, went around the Israel area and looked for sites that were important to the Christian faith. Where was Jesus born? Where was the upper room? Where was Mary? Where did she grow up? You know, where did these battles happen? Where did Peter live? What were the places that Jesus was at? That was the charge she took on. And she did as much research as she could do, and that was about 325 AD, so 300 years after Jesus. In 634, the Muslims invaded. And when the Muslims invaded, they looted and pillaged. Now, I will also tell you the Romans did the same thing. They tried to wipe the Israeli civilization off the map. And we'll see that here in a little bit. In 1917, that's what's considered modern time in Israel. Little over 100 years ago is their modern time. As we go through the pictures, you're going to hear me talk about tells. Marty explains it as this: these are the layers of human habitation. So whenever you look at archaeology, what they're looking at is the tells, the layers of human habitation. We are the top layer here on this site, but what's underneath? What would we find if we started digging underneath? Would we find, old things from the Germans that settled here? Would we find remnants of Indians who lived in this site? They did the same thing in Israel, and that's what the tells are, the layers of human habitation. Who lives in Israel now? 10 million Israelis live in Israel. That's 3 times more than Milwaukee. 7 million Jews, most of them, they live in Tel Aviv. 2.5 million Arabs live in Israel. Now, the Jews that live in Israel, 40% of them are secular Jews. They're like secular Christians. They say, I'm Jews, but they really don't live it. They don't go to synagogue. They don't take care or practice the Sabbath. They are like our secular Jews that are Christers. They do Christmas and Easter. They do Hanukkah and Passover, and that's about it. 20% are Hasidic Jews. These are the Orthodox Jews. These are the ones with the nice black hats and with the curls down the side. Now, these Hasidic Jews, are the government's, how do you call it, connection to the Jews. These people are paid to be that connection. What they did is they went to the government many, many decades ago and said, listen, we can't lose all of our history, all the Jewish history, all of the different laws and everything that goes along with being a Jew. And so we need to make sure we remain in that connection. And the only way we can do that is if we are constantly connected with God. So you need to pay us to be constantly connected to God. So the government, the Israeli government, pays this 20% housing, health care per child for the whole life. And they do it the same for their children. It's very much like the Amish. Once you're a Hasidic Jew, it's very hard to get out of being a Hasidic Jew. Okay? 20% are nationalistic Jews. These are Orthodox light. They practice everything. You'll see them walking around with maybe jackets on, but you'll see their tassels underneath. They might wear a hat, but they won't have their curls on the side. So they're Orthodox light. And then 20% are American Jews like Marty. They practice, but they don't wear the hat, they don't wear the prayer shawls, all of that kind of stuff. As far as the economy of Israel, as you can imagine, most of it is research and development. It's all about technology. I heard on the radio the other day that a lot of American technology goes to Israel to be totally morphed into something much bigger and better because their technology is so much farther advanced than American technology. Second is defense. And third, I was surprised, are diamonds. I thought diamonds came from Africa. Most of your diamonds here in the United States come from Israel. And then we already talked about the Zionist Jews, those that are constantly looking to get back to Israel, to live in the land of Israel. So like I said, we got that whole history lesson on our way to Caesarea, which is up the coast from on the Mediterranean Sea. And so in Acts, we hear about Caesarea. This is where Cornelius lived. Caesarea is mentioned in 3 books in the New Testament: Acts, Mark, and Matthew. And this was the place where Herod had his palace. Okay? So here we see it on the Red Sea. It's beautiful. The ocean was gorgeous that day. And after Constantine converted to being that Christian and the Roman Empire fell, this area was looted for decades by multiple people, multiple groups of people. But you can see the tells. So on the top, you see a mosaic floor, a Roman mosaic floor. And the Crusaders came in, they wanted to repair what the Muslims had destroyed. So they put in the mosaic floor, but underneath it you can see the layers of rocks that are there that were underneath it. The red clay, the stone that's underneath there, you could definitely see the different layers. After the Crusaders came in at 1096, the Muslims came back and they tore everything back down. But this was a grand place to live in the time of Herod. It was a grand place to live in the time of Constantine, they had a hippodrome, which is where they had their chariot races, they had their horse races, quite literally had the seating like a coliseum. They had aqueducts. Those aqueducts are 2,000 years old, and they're still standing. There aren't a whole lot of things that are still standing 2,000 years later. They even had a prison. Now, what they did is they did a lot of research on this, and they believe that between what they can find in the Bible as well as other writings, that this prison is where Paul was kept in Caesarea. And they also had a Colosseum. Much of these things have been unearthed by different archaeological groups. This Caesarea is now known as the Palm Beach of Israel. This is where Bibi Netanyahu lives. This is where a lot of the government lives. This is the special place to live. After Caesarea, we went up to Capernaum. Capernaum is where they believe that, and the Bible says, is where Jesus went when he heard that John was arrested. Now, Capernaum is also known as the city for Peter. This is where Peter lived. Many of the things that we saw were found by other churches because they started digging, and then they found it. Here, there is a church that was built in the 500s, and when they went to add on, they found and started digging and found out that they believe they built on top of Peter's house. So on the next slide, you can see there's a building on top of what they think is Peter's house. They dug underneath it. It's near the Golan Heights. They also found a Roman house of worship that was built on top of a Jewish synagogue. They believe that that Jewish synagogue was the synagogue where Jesus and Peter and many of the disciples actually did their preaching. You can see the difference. See the tells? The top brick from the bottom stone. And so they believe the bottom stone, that was the original synagogue that the Romans tore down and put their own house of worship on. So in Capernaum, we were learning about Peter, and this also sits on the Sea of Galilee. So if you look at your map, the Sea of Galilee is up by Tiberias and Nazareth, above the West Bank, near the Golan Heights. So after we went to Capernaum, we went on to, let me remember, the Mount of Beatitudes. On the Mount of Beatitudes, again, remember, these are all places that St. Helena deemed this is where this happened. Okay? So on the Mount of Beatitudes, they built a wonderful church. There is a wall for each one of the Beatitudes. And when it was being restored, they didn't have enough money, so they went to Mussolini in the early 1900s, and he gave money for this chapel on the Mount of Beatitudes. Now remember who Mussolini was? He was not a friend of the Jews, but he gave money in order to finish and refurbish this temple. So after going to the Mount of Beatitudes, we went to the Jordan River. One of the things that I found out is I had a lot of pictures in my mind of what things looked like, how big things were, how immensive things were from movies and from just my own imagination. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that the Jordan River was about the size of the Monashaw, okay? Or the Beaver Dam River or the Crawfish. Never did I expected, when you hear about the Israelites going across the Jordan River, it makes it sound like it's this big. It's not. But I did do a baptismal renewal at the Jordan River. Several of us did. Many of these are very touristy, I will be honest with you. I walked in to do this. Obviously, I had to pay to do it, but they furnished me with the white robe. I had to bring my swimsuit along. And so each one of us being pastors, we rebaptized everyone, those that wanted to be in the river. There were some that looked at the river and went, I don't think so. It was very cold. It was very cold. The weather in Israel, I was there late February, early March. It's like Georgia in the winter. So it can have warm days, or it can be warm during the day and cold at night. And so the river was not, but you know what? It didn't matter. It was okay. So we went to the Jordan River. We did the baptismal renewal. And then we went on to the Sea of Galilee. These pictures are actual pictures. These are not photoshopped. As we were driving up to the Sea of Galilee at Tiberias, there quite literally was a rainbow. Now, where that rainbow is on the bottom picture, that land there is Jordan, not Israel. That's how close Jordan is to Israel. The boat there, that's not a boat we rode on, that's a boat like what we rode on. We got there. Sun was partially out. It was beautiful. We got on the boat. No sooner got out in the middle of the sea, the wind kicked up and it started pouring. Have you heard this story before? As soon as we got back and docked and got off the boat, it stopped raining and the wind went away. Have we heard this story before? It did not go unnoticed. And so that was the other part about this trip to Israel, is that connection and feeling those things and knowing, okay, we were all a bunch of disciples sitting on a boat. It was windy, it was raining, it was cold. We just wanted off. So that was our Sea of Galilee. Again, we were trying to we were supposed to do all of this stuff in the first 2 days, and we did it in less than a day. We still haven't slept. No, we have not slept yet. Went to that night, now we're still on Thursday. Thursday night, we went to a kibbutz. Now, a lot of us all heard about kibbutzes because of October 7th, right? October 7th, the kibbutzes were the ones that were where the Gazans had gone in and started attacking. What a kibbutz is, it's built on the Marxist commune system. So it is a group that got together and said, hey, this is going to be our city. We are going to work together in a commune system, and we're just going to stay in our own little city. This was back in the early 1900s. What they realized, it didn't work so well. So they remained having kibbutzes, but what they do now is they have figured out things that they can do in those kibbutzes to get people to come in and spend their money. This particular one had a hotel. Most of the people in the kibbutz, they work at the hotel. They might be maids. They might be chauffeurs. They might do the laundry. They might do, all of those things. But the kibbutz also has its own security. It has its own schools. It has its own government, all of that kind of stuff. So they've kind of mixed capitalism and the commune system together to make it work. There are about 270 kibbutzes dotted across Israel. And so, and many of them, some of them do that. Some of them manufacture things or make things. Some are tourist hubs, depending on where that kibbutz is located. So we spent the night in the kibbutz. We got to bed about 10 o'clock that night. Originally, what was supposed to happen is that we were supposed to spend about an hour, hour and a half in worship every night that we were there together, meditating on what we saw, talking about what we felt, all of that stuff. We didn't get time to do that Thursday night. We were all a little bit tired. So we woke up the next day, Friday morning, and immediately went to Mandala. Mandala is where they believe that Mary Magdalene, that's her hometown. There was a very large fish market that they found and they dug up and also found a synagogue from 65 AD. That box there that you see in the corner, that is the box that held the Torah for the synagogue. Now, how did a synagogue from 65 AD remain intact, where the last one that we saw in Capernaum had been decimated? They knew the Romans were coming. They covered it with sand. The Romans were lazy. They didn't want to uncover it. How did they find this? The Catholic Church wanted to build a hotel and started digging. And they found this synagogue and then the fish markets and all of that. So, from where that box is that held the Torah, if you walk 12 feet, there's glass windows that look into a hotel front lobby. The Catholic Church actually owns this land and have opened it up so that visitors can come and see it. So they are continuing to excavate. It's a very large area. After Magdala, we went to Cana. What happened in Cana? The first miracle. Again, they built a church on top of what they believe was the place that Jesus did his miracle. So you walk into the church, you walk down a couple flight stairs down into the bottom of what we would call the basement of the church. That's where they have the cases around what they think are the jars that held the wine. Now, I'm a little suspect about that just by looking at the jar, but they were very large jars. This is also, Cana is a suburb of Nazareth. So if you look at your map, you will see Nazareth on your map just south of Tiberias. Nazareth has one of the largest Byzantine churches. Now, Byzantine, remember, this is during Roman time. St. Helena came through and decided, we think that this is the place that Mary's house is. So they built a church on top of it. So you walk down, again, downstairs. You look like you're going into the basement. And here is where they believe Mary's home was identified by Constantine's mom. Very well decorated, of course. All stone. And then you walk back up and you are in the middle of this great big church. Beautiful church. Nazareth is also the home of Nazareth is the largest population of Arabs. live in Nazareth. So most Jews live in Tel Aviv, most of the Arabs live in Nazareth. Nazareth is the largest Arab city. It was really weird to see signs. The signs were in Hebrew, Arabic, and on the bottom was English. Muslim houses dotted the side hills. We could tell which houses belonged to the Muslims because they found a loophole in the tax code. They didn't finish their house, they didn't have to pay taxes. So as you drove through Nazareth, you would see houses with no windows on the third floor. You would see a third floor being started, but not finished. You would see a second floor without a roof because it wasn't finished. Because if a house wasn't finished, they didn't pay taxes. The other thing is you could see the difference between an Arab city and a Jewish city just by the cars and how people took care of things, that kind of stuff. So Nazareth, like I said, is the largest Arab city. We went through Nazareth, did some touring, and then we went to Tel Medigo. Tel Medigo, this site overlooks the Valley of Armageddon. Not only is the Valley of Armageddon where Josiah fought Egypt in 1692 BC, but they believe that this is the valley that the final war will be fought that is talked about in Revelation. It's beautiful. And you can see where people can come from so many different areas into one space. On Tel Medigo, again, there are a lot of tells. This is a very tall, I won't call it a mountain, it's a hill. I'm from Wisconsin, everything's a mountain. But there are layers and layers of history that overlook the Valley of Armageddon. This site, the University of Chicago came in and started blasting. And what they realized is when they blasted, those layers of tells would get all mixed up. And they couldn't tell what belonged to what. So they stopped. They went around the back of the hill and started doing their archaeology like they should have done in the first place. Started, taking layers off at a time. When they started taking layers off, what they found was the city gate of Canaan. Now, this would have been the city gate that Abraham would have gone in and out of. So the stairs are here. We did not take those. There's an extra path. They didn't want people going up and down the stairs. But that's the actual gate. Halfway up that large brick wall, you can see a piece of wood. That wood is the archaeological line of where things below that line, that's where they found it, and the blocks stayed. They never moved those blocks. The ones above, they had taken down and put back together. So that's how we knew what was there when they found it and what was on top of it. So we have the gate of Canaan. As we walk further on their paths, they found one of the palaces of Solomon. So we walked where Abraham walked. We walked where Peter, where Mary Magdalene, where Jesus, where the disciples were. We also got to walk in Solomon's palace. They found his stables. They found his chariots. They found a lot of pieces of his palace. And then above that, they found where the Armenians had come in centuries later, and lived as well. So this was a place where all of the tells were based on top of each other. It was just, blew my mind that I could actually be in a place where all of those people were. Last week, Thursday, I went to talk to the 6th graders at Coda's school. And I explained to them, I talked to their English class. And I'm trying to think, how do I make this go into an English class? Well, they were reading The Hobbit. And I told them, I said, think about how cool it would be if you could actually walk where that book took place. I got to walk where the Bible took place. How cool is that? So here's Talmedigo. After Talmedigo, we did a little bit of more touring. We went to Ben Sham. That big hill in the back is where they believe the death of Saul and the death of Jonathan happened. So this was one of their big, the places where they had one of their big battles. At the bottom of that hill, this is a Roman city that was put together as, of course, after. And so they have completely gone through archaeologically in this city. Half of it was done by the archaeologists from Jerusalem, and half of it was done by the archaeologists in Tel Aviv. The reason is because the archaeologists in Jerusalem believed that you uncovered it, you logged and cataloged everything, and you cover it back up. Tel Aviv archaeologists believed that you uncover it, you log everything, and you put it back together. So part of this was put together, and part of it was not. But what they did do is they put together this large metal model of what that city would have looked like. It had a hippodrome for their horses in their Colosseum. It had the palace. It had the different neighborhoods. It had aqueducts, all of those things. And this Roman city was destroyed in 749 AD by an earthquake. After we went to Ben Sham, we went into the West Bank. And we got a nice, long, more history lesson. Our history was talking about what we needed to know and why the West Bank was built the way it was. So in 66 AD was the first rebellion of the Jews. This is when they locked themselves in the old city, and basically the Romans starved them out until they said, we give. Okay? In 132 AD was the second rebellion of the Jews. And the Romans said, no, we're not going to do this again. We're going to change the name of Jerusalem, and we're going to change the name of Israel. And the emperor of Rome says, well, who was the biggest enemy of the Jews? The Philistines. So they changed the name to Philistine. In 70 AD, the Muslims and the Arabs came in and settled, and in 299 AD, the Ottoman Empire came to be, took over the region, and was there technically till 1922. The Ottoman Empire were the Arabs. During the 19th century, before 1922, I'd say late 1890s into the early 1900s, Jewish nationals would come back into the empire and purchase land. How did they purchase land? What happened was the Arabs couldn't make the land do what they wanted it to do. They're not real good farmers. They were not really good business people. So the Jews came in, bought the land, and said, here, you can live here, and I'll show you how to do this on your land. It was a precursor to bring Israel back. During World War I, England and France, they took over the Ottoman Empire, And Britain named the land Palestine. In 1947, there was a two-state solution. Have we heard about a two-state solution before? Everybody's saying we need a two-state solution. It already happened. In 1947, I had no clue. But do you know what happened the day after they signed that two-state solution? The Arabs attacked the Jews because they wanted more. They wanted all the land. They didn't want to share it. In 1967 was the Six-Day War. This is when multiple Arab nations came against Israel, and Israel won. Now, back in 1947 and 1967, millions of Arabs fled to what is now Jordan. And to this day, 3 generations later, some of those Arabs still live in refugee camps. Why? That would be my question. Why? Well, if we look at the maps, these are all Arab nations around Israel. So there's plenty of places for the Arabs to go, right? Nobody would take them. Jordan was the only one who would take them. As we look at the map of Israel itself, this map is from I usually can read this, 1923. This is how much was territory England had. There was part English, part Israel, and then you had what was called Transjordan. Then as we move forward to 1947, remember that two-state solution? This is what the two-state solution looked like. The orange is where the Arabs lived. The white is where Israelis lived. Looked pretty fair to me. Actually, the Arabs got more land than Israel. All Israel wanted was peace. And they were willing to give whatever they could to have peace. But like I said, the day after they signed it, the Arabs attacked Israel. So today, as of 1967, this is what it looks like. So the light blue is where the Arabs are or live. The white is Israel, or where the Israelis live. Now, let's talk about the West Bank quick. I was under the impression that the West Bank, the Arabs, the Israelis, live in their own sections and then they kind of merge together in part of it. No. There are checkpoints all over the West Bank. You want to go to the city of Jericho? No Israeli is allowed in Jericho. Only Arabs. You want to go to Bethlehem? Only Arabs are allowed in Bethlehem. It was like they took the map of the West Bank and threw darts at it and said, this will be for the Arabs, this will be for the Israelis, this will be for both. And so there are some cities where both Arabs and Israelis live. But there are checkpoints everywhere. We're still on Friday. We're still getting this on Friday. This next day, Saturday, we were supposed to go to Bethlehem. And our tour guide was not going to be able to go because he was Israeli. They had to hire a different tour guide for when we got to Bethlehem to give us the tour of Bethlehem because he could not go because he was Israeli. So that's how the West Bank looks. It was not as cut and dried. I was kind of envisioning, the Civil War. Here's the North and here's the South. No. It is hodgepodge, and everybody's got to have their own stickers and everybody's got to have their own license plates. You could tell who was who, and like I said, had many checkpoints that we had to go through. So what we did is we started in Tel Aviv, drove up to the Sea of Galilee, and we've come down the Jordan River and basically could see Jordan the whole time. When we got to the West Bank, we cut across the West Bank to Jerusalem. Friday night, we drove into Jerusalem. It was about 5:30. It was a beautiful sunset. You can see the wall of the old city. We drove by the Mount of Olives. We drove by the old city. We drove by the Holy Sepulchre and the Dome. And we went to our hotel. At supper time, they gathered us all together and said, "You're here for 6 days. Unpack and relax. You just went through 2 days or 4 days into. It's time to relax." And so I didn't have a roommate. Guess what I did? I unpacked. I made the room my own, which was wonderful, until we got up at 6:30 the next morning, had breakfast, got on the bus, drove less than 10 minutes, and went to the old city that morning. When we got to the old city, we went to the historic gates. This is the North Gate, one of the 7 of the old city of Jerusalem. Look at the old gate. If you look at the old gate, you see all those pot marks? Those are not birds. Those are bullet holes. Jordan actually in 1967 held that gate. It was theirs, and the Israelis took it by force. So they have part of the old city now. Okay? We were on the bus just getting off when the sirens went off for the bombs that morning. A little bit after 8 o'clock. Where do you go when you're on a bus and you got bombs coming? You shelter in the North Gate. That's all of us standing there while the sirens are going off, wondering what's going on. Now the nice thing is our guide, Marty, was Israeli Defense Force. He was getting all of his stuff on his phone. He knew what was going on. Let's stand here, let's see what's happening. So we stood there till we got the all clear, and Marty says, "Oh, it's going to be just fine. Let's continue." So we went to the upper room. Again, remember, this is what they say was the upper room. I don't know if it was or it wasn't. But I will say you can see also that the Romans had been in the upper room and the Crusaders had been in the upper room. There's a lot of people that went in because you could see their handprint on the upper room. Now the upper room is not that large. And of course there wasn't anything in there. We just walked in there. The only thing that was in there was a calico cat. After the upper room, we went to the tomb of David. Now, I couldn't take any pictures of the tomb of David, but as we are walking, and the women had a separate place to go view the tomb of David where the men could go otherwise, because that was a very sacred place, as you can imagine. And as we came out from the tomb of David, Marty got a call and said, "What are you doing? You need to get back to the hotel where there's a bomb shelter." And all of us said, "I'll be honest with you, their sirens there sound just like our tornado sirens. Just like them." I said, "Marty, do you know what the Midwesterners do when the sirens go off? We don't go to a bomb shelter, we don't go to a basement, we go outside and see what's going on. Don't do that here," he said. We spent most of our Saturday either in the bomb shelter, which is normal for the Israelis, and how do I know that? Because they were hosting a bar mitzvah in the bomb shelter, just in case. All the people are moving in, they just kept right on doing what they were doing. So it must have been a normal thing for them. We then decided to go to the parking garage. Was a little bit better. We could spread out a little bit. We weren't so crammed in. In the midst of that, when we get the all clear, we went to the ballroom. And we would sit and we would talk about what's going on and why things were happening and what do we do now. And we all agreed we were in the safest place we could be. The Muslims, they don't want to hit the Dome of the Rock. The Jews don't want to hit the old city. And the Christians don't want any of that archaeological, those things to get hit either. So America's not going to bomb it. So how much better, how much safer could we be? So we found out that Iran was bombing their neighbors. So about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they sat us down and said, go pack. You have to be able to move in 15 minutes. About 4:30, we got a text that said, get on the bus in the next 15 minutes. We all got our stuff, got on the bus. We didn't know what was going on. We just knew enough to just get on the bus. We were on the bus for about 10 minutes, and he said, oh, by the way, you guys are going to Egypt. Well, not on my list of things to do, but all right. You know, you told us we were going to walk in all of these different people's tracks. We didn't believe we were going to be exiled to Egypt like Jesus was. Here we are. On our way, we got to see the Iron Dome actual work. Down below, those are street lights. But way up high, you can see the missile that was coming in, and we got to see it blown out of the sky. Tell me there isn't a God. He had that made by the people that are his. The middle picture, we went down to Eliat. So if you look at your map, the very bottom, very tip of Israel is Eliat. This is known as the Las Vegas of Israel. They don't gamble, but this is where everybody goes to vacation. This is where all of the ritzy hotels are. So I was staying in a hotel that I had bomber jets flying outside. We actually saw 2 drones get shot down. Those are the hills on the Red Sea. So think about it. Moses and the Israelites came across those hills to the Red Sea. Down on the bottom is not easy to see from this far, but that is the Red Sea, and there is a destroyer on the Red Sea, less than a quarter mile off of the coastline of Israel. So, yeah, it changed really fast. Nobody was panicking. Hospitality was wonderful. Yeah, getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go into the stairwell was a little bit, do I have to? But we did. So we then left Eliat and went to Egypt. Took us 3 hours to get across the border. They didn't allow us to bring our cameras with. Why they let us bring our phones, I don't know, but they wouldn't let us take our cameras. We had to take our SD cards out, and they're mailing the cameras back. I don't care. Mine was a little itty-bitty thing, but some people had like $12,000 cameras. So we were sitting on the buses not just our group, there were 3 groups of Americans that were being taken to Egypt. We were sitting there waiting. We're going, okay, come on. We know this is all going. Let's go. What are we waiting on? We were waiting on our guard. So if you look at the map there, way on the right-hand side as you're looking at it is Eliat at the top of the Red Sea. There's a straight shot highway that would take me right to the Suez Canal and to Cairo. Could we take that? No. We couldn't take that highway because that's where the Bedouins live, and the Bedouins are with ISIS, and they were looking for Americans. So we had to follow the bottom of the Sinai Peninsula, all the way around the Sinai Desert. As we were doing that, you could see that they had tried to build resort towns on the Red Sea. They started those back in 2018. What happened in 2020? COVID. They lost all their funding. So they're half-built resort towns on the side and the Red Sea is beautiful, just as beautiful as the Mediterranean Sea. But you can see how rocky the Sinai Desert is, how many hills and mountains. We were constantly doing one of these, up and down, checkpoints all the way through. They were constantly checking. We had to make sure we had all of our IDs because we didn't know if they were going to come on the buses or not. And then about 10 o'clock, we got to the Suez Canal. There are 12 lanes for traffic to get across the Suez Canal during the day. Again, we went through about 10 o'clock, so there was not a lot of traffic. But there were 4 checkpoints to get over or through the Suez Canal tunnels. So we got to Cairo about 10:30, 10:45 Saturday night. All right? Oh, no, that was Sunday night. Sorry, Saturday was the trip to Eliat. Sunday was the trip to Cairo. And they said, well, we can't get you out of here until Monday night in early Tuesday morning, so what are we going to do? We're going to take you to the pyramids. So we went to the pyramids, we went to the Sphinx. There's also a picture of the Nile River outside of our hotel. It overlooked the Nile River. Nile River looks like the Mississippi. Again, I thought it was going to be more majestic, more, no, it looks like the Mississippi going through town. And maybe I've just done too much traveling. I don't know. So our whole group, we got to go. The picture before this was the gentleman sitting in a suit. He was our bodyguard. He carried guns on both hips. We were standing there at the pyramid, talking to him because we didn't want to go in the pyramid like some of the other guys. And while we were talking to him, I looked around, and there were 3 other guards standing around us. I don't know what was going on at the pyramids. I don't know why us Americans needed to be guarded like that, but I was thankful that they knew what was going on. These guys were all from the Egyptian army. Okay? So in Cairo, we also stayed at a hotel that was an old palace that was constructed in the late 1800s. And the government decided they didn't want it anymore, so they sold it to a hotel. They put up 2 towers, and they refurbished the whole thing. So mosaic tile, you could definitely tell it was a palace. All the big rooms and the big windows and all of that. So we went to Cairo. We got to see all of these things. I got to knock them off a bucket list I didn't even know it was on. And then we got to go home. We got to go home. So Monday night, we got on the plane. I was back in my bed Tuesday night. So in less than a week, this all took place. My takeaways, first of all, I always felt safe. I got a little worried when we got to Cairo Airport and they said 2 airplanes didn't get off the ground because of no fly. But other than that, we always felt safe. We always felt taken care of, and there was nobody panicking. You could tell that the Israelis lived this all the time. Arabs and Jews lived together. It's the radicalized ones that created the problems. Most of you know, if you don't already, that my husband was in the Gulf War. He fought against Muslims. And to this day, there are days where he works, Muslims come in the trucks, and they're a trigger for him. So I asked Marty, as someone who was there October 7th, who's part of the IDF, how do you live with this every day? My husband doesn't have to see Muslims every day. He doesn't have to see Arabs every day. Marty does, knowing what they've done to your people. And he told me the most insightful thing, and he said, it's about their heart. He said, and I can't tell their heart by looking at them. So I always look at them with love until they prove me otherwise. And I thought that was very insightful coming from a gentleman. And I was very cautious. I said, if you don't want to answer this question, that's just fine. But that's how he told me. He said, it's about the heart. The other thing that I realized is that the Jews have always wanted peace, to their detriment, to the ability of giving things away just for peace. I also realized that I needed to enjoy life where I was at. I'm glad I took a lot of notes, because when I started looking at the notes, I'm going, I didn't remember doing that, because we were going so fast, seeing so many things. And when you do that, you lose the moment. I have so many things that have happened in my life. I need to reflect and be in that moment. And then being flexible and connecting with people. I was with 23 other clergy. The faith, the prayers, all of those things, they uplifted us. You would have never known that we were in the middle of a war zone, because it was the connection of people and the ability to just move, be flexible. Okay, on to the next thing. Okay, there's no worries. No worries. I loved my trip. I was supposed to see 11 days worth of this. And God probably didn't give me 11 days because I couldn't have talked about it in an hour. At least not to make a whole lot of sense of it. And maybe that's why God did what he did. My brother-in-law, I just knew things were going to happen, he said. Yeah, okay. But it was well worth the trip. And I was so blessed to go on it. When I read the scripture now, when I see the stories, I look at them totally different. And it's been a wonderful, eye-opening experience. And I have been so blessed to be able to share it on top of everything else. So, with that, where did I put my... I don't even know where I put them. Maybe I didn't bring them out here. I do have rocks that I did bring back. We didn't get to do any shopping. You notice, I didn't do any shopping because I was told by our leader of the group, don't shop at the little shops. You're going to get robbed. You're not going to get good quality. All of that. Don't worry about it. I've got every night, we've got places to go or people to see. A jeweler, the olive wood people, you know, you're going to get good quality. It's going to be well worth your money. So don't do any shopping. So we didn't do any shopping. So I got to the pyramids and I picked up a couple pyramid rocks and took them with me for the boys to see. I got to the Egyptian airport and said, I had nothing. So I went to the duty-free store. I'm going, my family likes wine, they like spirits, let me see what I can find. And I'm looking at the spirits and it's all the stuff I can buy downtown, except for some Egyptian wine. So I brought 6 bottles of Egyptian wine back. It's not that good. We had it at Easter and I've still got 4 bottles left. It's not that good. So yeah, we didn't get to do a lot of shopping. I have a book on the pyramids because I was able to go to that gift shop at the pyramids. But we weren't allowed to go even to the shops in Cairo because they were announcing, if you're an American, you're at peril. Stay within the walls. We need to get you out. So I don't have a lot of, I got a lot of pictures, I got a lot of memories, but not a lot of souvenirs, which is okay. We don't need more stuff, right? But I've got stories to tell. Are there any questions? No. He was trying to make up for the 2 days that we lost. because we got there 2 days late because of the weather. He didn't know anything was going to happen. Nothing was, let's be honest, even the gentleman who puts all of these together, he had just done a pilgrimage 2 weeks before. No problems. He's done this since 1987, and not one of his groups has ever heard the sirens, much less been part of something like this. He said, I don't know what it's about your group, but between the storm and the war, but he did say he wanted all of us to come back. So there really was no inclination. In fact, my tour guide, he would have continued to take us through the North Gate if his tour grew, if his bosses wouldn't have called him and told him you need to get them back because of liability. Yeah. So we would have probably gotten more. We were supposed to go to Bethlehem that afternoon. We were supposed to see the Dead Sea. We were supposed to go to the Holy Sepulchre. We were supposed to go to the Mount of Olives. We were supposed to go, they had us jam-packed. Not as bad as we did the 2 days, but we were going all over, and it wasn't going to happen. Any other questions? Wasn't that story? He gave the money in the early 30s. So it was probably before Hitler. And so none of the Third Reich was going on, and yet, Mussolini didn't have that connection. It was just the irony of him giving that money, and now all of a sudden this is where you go. Yeah, that story stuck with me because of the irony of it all. Yeah, Mussolini. Well, there are a lot of people who are still studying him. So.
You loved him or hated him.
Yeah.
Maybe he had ulterior motives. Put him on his side, but watch out, I might take you out later on.
That could be. I will say I was very shocked at the Catholic presence in Israel and the amount of sites that the Catholics actually take care of in Israel, which is probably a good thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing either. I was just kind of surprised in all of that.
Did you need a visa to get into Egypt?
I think they gave us an emergency visa, and that's why it took 3 hours for us to get through. And that's part of the reason why they took us to Eliat is, well, first of all, Eliat was closer to the Egyptian border. But the other reason was it took them over 10 hours to drive the buses from Cairo to Eliat, which is where the border was, and to coordinate getting us across. And Gate 1 was our tour organization that took care of everything, and they took a big hit on this. Because remember, when it's a storm and you can't get to somewhere, you can get reimbursed travel insurance. But as soon as those sirens and those bombs go, travel insurance goes out the window. There is none. So they took a huge hit getting us home, doing what they did. And like I said, they did a wonderful job. Because we all thought we were perfectly safe in Jerusalem.
We were all worried here.
I know. There were already exit strategies being put together. My son had already called Italy and said, if nobody else can get her out, we can. He also had 2 or 3 guys here in the United States that had connections. Get her to Egypt, we can get her home no matter what. So I already knew. When I left, my husband said, don't make me come and get you. I said, well, I know you won't be alone. So, and I truly, to be honest with you, got to Israel and turned every one of my electronic devices off. That's why I got a camera. I was not going to be caught. I was not going to have a phone on. I was not going to deal with any of that. And so I had all my phone, and my family knew the devices were going to be off. What was I going to do? I'm in Israel. What are you going to call me for anyways? And as soon as those sirens went off, I turned the phone on. And I texted my husband and my kid, Corey, because that particular phone didn't have Ryan's phone number in it. And I didn't want to text the wrong person. Don't worry, I'm safe, right? But it had Jane's number in it, and I knew she could tell everybody, so that's why she got a text. But I also knew it was 12:30 in the morning. Nobody's going to get my text at 12:30 in the morning, but when they wake up, it'll be there. Well, Corey got a text that said, don't worry, I'm safe. He doesn't watch the news. He called Ryan and said, what's going on? And Ryan goes, don't you know? And Ryan's trying to explain to him what's going on, and Corey's going, oh, okay. Well, I haven't heard from Dad yet, so he must not be up yet. Let me drive to Dad, and it was kind of a cluster, but that's okay. That's all right. I told my husband it was turnabout's fair play. 35 years ago, he was in the Gulf War. I sat in front of the TV watching CNN. We had no cell phones. We had no email. We didn't even have phone lines. And I said, dude, at least I was able to text you and let you know where I was going, what I was doing, what was happening. I said, I didn't get that luxury. And he was like, yeah, okay. So, yeah. Yeah, well, that's just as upset as I would have been. But again, God had a plan. He made it happen. His hand has been on this trip since the day Parker asked me to sign on the application. I would love to go back. I would love to go back. I have some family members that, no, I can't go back. I can't. Well, it has to, initially my husband, I told him, I said, Israel's on my bucket list. And he says, well, it's not on mine, so you're going to have to go by yourself. Well, guess what? I figured out a way to go by myself. Guess what? He didn't wanted me to go by myself. He was good. Dude, you can't have it both ways. But I would love to go back. And they have offered all of us with this trip to go back. And I think the Knights Templar would pick up the thing again, but that would be wonderful, but it won't be next February. Too soon. But I think as we were all talking, as we were, getting ready to board the plane in Cairo, we all had that same, we had such a good experience, we all wanted to go back. But we all had family members back home that there wasn't, no, we aren't talking about this. So definitely, I would love to go back, but it'll be a while. I have hope, though. We had several pastors that were 70 years old that were doing this pilgrimage. So I was a little worried. They were saying we had to walk 5 miles a day and, do a lot of climbing and all of that kind of stuff. And I was really a little worried. Even Coda was a little worried. Grandma, have you been walking? And I said, well, I've been walking back and forth to the barn and back. That's not enough, Grandma. And then I got there, and there's 70-somethings, and one guy had a cane, and I was like, I can do this. I told Coda, I said, I've got Midwest want to. I can do whatever I need to do in order to get through this. So, yeah. So I'll get back there. It just won't be anytime soon. So, at least not right now. Any other? Well, thank you for coming out to be part of this.